Just wait a few minutes until the participants join us. Okay, I think we can start. Good morning, New York. Good morning, Brazil. Good afternoon for those here in Europe. Welcome to the webinar, Environmental Perspectives, Brazil and the USA in the Coming Years. This webinar is organized by the Consulate General of Brazil in New York and FGV Europe, the international office of the Brazilian think tank, Fundação Getulio Vargas. I'm Mariana Fleischhauer, Manager of Representation Office at FGV Europe, speaking from Cologne, Germany, and would like to welcome all to our online event. Before we start, I would like to make a disclaimer that all statements made by guests, panelists, and moderators during this online event reflect their own personal opinions and do not necessarily represent the institutional position of FGV or the Brazilian Consulate. We also emphasize that all participants have voluntarily agreed to take part in this webinar, and we thank you for that. I also would like to ensure everybody's seeing and listening in a good quality. If you're experiencing any technical issues, please write in the chat and our colleagues will try to assist you. I wait a few minutes right now. Please make sure your connection is stable and properly working. I'm checking the chat together with Sarah. If you have any question, please write in the chat. William, welcome. Sound is perfect. Thank you. So the sound is really good. Thank you. Other participants, if you want to write something in the chat about the audio and video. Yeah, okay. Okay, I think the chat seems pretty good. Everybody's listening and seeing. We have around 120 people subscribed to this event today. So we thank you for your time and willingness to engage with us in this important discussion. And once again, welcome everyone to the webinar, Environmental Perspectives, Brazil and the USA in the Coming Years. We are going to have two panels with discussion topics related to environmental relations of Brazil and the United States. The first panel is about environmental governance, Brazil-US environmental relations. The second is integrated public policies for sustainable development with focus on Amazon. We have exciting debates ahead of us, so I think we should start the program. And to give the welcome remarks, I'm pleased to introduce Ambassador Aldanio Sena Ganem, Consulate General of Brazil in New York, former Ambassador of Brazil in Panama, former Consulate General of Brazil in Miami, Atlanta, and San Francisco. Ambassador Aldanio, we are truly honored to have you with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mariana, and thank you, Dr. Cesar Campos as well, with whom we have been talking. And it's a great pleasure to be with you and say a few words today on this relevant webinar. I would like also to recognize representatives of Columbia, NYU, and Princeton universities, with whom we have established and developed many programs of cooperation. And all of you present today, it's a really important audience, and I thank you for your time. I will congratulate, first of all, FGV for this initiative, for the professors from FGV, and looking for the consulate proposing a program of cooperation, and I'm very happy to start this program today. In my opinion, sustainable development, and I think it's a general opinion, with democracy, rule of law are today the main subjects in the debate around the world, and it's a subject that we should really commit to it and start to take all levels with appropriate decisions. It's a question for me of survival. And require public policies, investments, appropriate legislation, but most of all, it requires coordination and a partnership with the whole society. And of course, that academia is a very important part of governments in this endeavor. I think that based on our ecosystems and resources, abundance of resources, modern legislation in Brazil, and our commitment, present commitment to sustainable development, Brazil will be a major player in the world in this area. I would highlight especially three areas that are very relevant in the relationship with the United States: carbon credit market, bioeconomy, and energy transition. Regarding the carbon dioxide emission, as you know, the Brazilian Congress is passing a project, the Brazilian Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trade System, that will enable Brazil to trade carbon dioxide emission. And according to Climate Policy Initiative from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil has the potential to capture 15 billion tons of carbon emission in the period of 30 years only with reforestation. And if you monetize this, applying a very conservative rate of $25 per ton, the total sum would be almost $40 billion. But this is a very conservative cipher because normally it is traded today the ton almost $100. So we are speaking in terms of $1 trillion only in capture in carbon dioxide emission in reforestation. So it's a huge sector to work. Second, bioeconomy. And I will call your attention for the Amazon Institute Plus 21. That is an institute linked to the Confederation of Industries in Brazil. And they are in coordination with small industries and companies developing products as sustainable industrial oils, competitiveness, integrated solution. You are probably much more aware than myself of the immense possibilities of sustainable product development and biosolutions. I would also highlight in terms of the sustainable development, sustainable production, using the possibilities in Amazonian basin and everywhere in Brazil, the possibility of creating a Green Brazil stamp, a label to be imprinted in the packaging, which would stress the uniqueness of our products. But I will say that in the third sector, energy transition, it is certainly where Brazil will be a world leader. First of all, in clean hydrogen, Industrial polos of Camaçari, Bahia, Pecém, Ceará, Suape, Pernambuco, Açu, Rio, and Parnaíba, Rio, Piauí, sorry, will place Brazil one of the main producers of clean hydrogen and one of the main exporters in the world. Only in the Unigel industry plant in Bahia, there will be they are estimating their production in 2027, 100,000 tons per year. In solar and wind power, there is a huge potential. If you take in consideration, for example, the total production of Brazil, total energy production of Brazilian matrix is 200 gigawatts. In wind energy, power wind energy, the potential in northeast of Brazil is 2,100. That's to say, 10 times the total Brazilian production of energy. And if you take solar energy, the potential of production in Brazil is 21,000. That's to say, 100 times the potential of the production of energy in Brazil. Just to give you an idea of our huge potential of being a powerhouse in energy production. But yet, it is in mobility. If you can convince the world about an integrated approach for biofuels and hybrid products, that the Brazilian potential is the highest. We just passed a law in the Brazilian Congress, Green Mobility. I don't have the name of the project here, but consider this integrated approach that will considers a clean energy environment since the source of the inputs until the disposal of machinery use, the disposal of discard of the transportation of it. As you know, because of the main economies in the world, the United States and China, they preferred the alternative for electric vehicles. This is the dominant approach today. But in fact, this approach just considers the use of fuel in transportation. And Brazil, with this integrated approach, considers the whole process. And if we can convince the world about this approach, it will be really a huge progress in sustainable development. And because of this integrated approach, as you know, the industries in automobile sectors and other related sectors are receiving huge investments. If I'm not wrong, in the next 5 years, there will be around $40 billion announced in investments. But beyond the vehicle production, I would say the sustainable aviation fuel will be the future and will be a huge economy or let's say capture of carbon dioxide. And this is a sector that just started. And coming back to the vehicle use of biofuels, China today makes just 1% of biofuels in their transportation system. Imagine only China increasing their percentage of use of biofuels in the transportation system. So, because of all this development, I would say that Brazil will be receiving in next years huge international foreign direct investments in energy transition. They will have a multiplying effect in many other sectors. I would say technology, data centers, for example, that use huge energy capacity, consume energy, and many other sectors. And for me, this will create a cluster of production integrated in many sectors. If it is a prognostic that is real, and I think so, Brazil will be integrated in value chains in technology, energy transition, machinery production, and many other sectors. And will be part of the chain restructuring, value chains and restructuring the world, especially considering the geopolitical situation. Those are the approach for the main sector of cooperation with the United States today, presently, with democracy, rules of law, and racial equality, and the social questions. And I think we are in the right path in cooperation in these sectors, and I hope that it will continue. Let's hope for it. And this is our common vision, and I think that it's a vision in the right direction. I thank you so much. I hope that I did not speak too much. I would like to hear your comments on these and other subjects. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for your kind words and the insights about the Brazilian renewable energy matrix. We truly appreciate the partnership with the Brazilian Consulate. Now, I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Cesar Cunha Campos, General Director of FGV Europe, Director of Fundação Getulio Vargas for over 20 years, and our major supporter for all initiatives with the Consulate. Dr. Cesar, over to you.
Thank you, Mariana. So, bom dia, good morning, good afternoon. Yes, I'd like to welcome all of you for this event, and thank you for the ambassador that did a very good explanation about what is going on. So, thank you, Ambassador Adalino Sena Ganem, Deputy Consul General Thiago de Faria Miranda, and Deputy Consul General Leonardo de Almeida Carneiro, ENG. That was very good to work together. We have partnered with FGV Europe team in the organization of this seminar, marking the beginning of fruitful collaboration. I hope that we can do more events like that. I also would like to thank our speakers, panelists, and participants for joining us today to debate such a timely and critical topic. Let me take the opportunity to briefly introduce who you are. I think FGV Europe is something new, and I think we have to explain what FGV Europe is about. FGV Europe is an international company based in Germany, which belongs to one of the most important think tanks in Latin America, Fundação Getulio Vargas. We operate in Europe, in the Americas and Africa, and FGV Europe aims to make available the vast knowledge about Brazilian society, as you are going to see later on, accumulate over 75 years of existence. On the other hand, we also want to be close to the main opinion makers in this constantly changing world. So it's very important for FGV to be in Europe, to be in the United States or in Africa, in order to understand the environment that Brazil is in. Our intellectual activities foster and enhance bilateral and multilateral exchange, encourage cooperation on issues of mutual interest, notably in the fields of economics, law, international relations, communication, administration, history, and mathematics. Our experts guide clients in all phases of project planning, implementation management, support by a global network of international institutions, ensuring a global reach for our initiatives. After this short introduction, I'm sorry to do that, but it was important for us to explain what FGV Europe is about. Let's come back to our seminar. The conversation that we will have today could not be more relevant, as the ambassador has pointed out, as the world stands as a critical point fighting against the climate change. So we are living in Europe, we are close to Brussels, and always in all meetings, they talk about environment change. Today's theme offers an opportunity to reflect on how these two nations, US and Brazil, can collaborate, learn from each other, this is very important, and lead the global responsibility toward a more sustainable future. Therefore, we believe that by fostering dialogues and cooperation, we can support innovative solutions that address the challenge. We hope that this event inspires new ideas, knowledge, and strengthens partnership, able to contribute to a healthier, more sustainable planet. Once again, thank you for joining us. Have a great seminar. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Cesar, for your participation and warm welcoming. We may now start the first panel, Environmental Governance, Brazil-US Environmental Relations. We are pleased to have for this panel Sylvia Pearson, Head of the North America Office at Invest São Paulo, Saulo Kozlowski, Associate Professor of Urban Planning and Public Service at New York University, Adalberto Bueno Neto, Country Director for Brazil of the Missouri Department of Economic Development, Laura Albuquerque, Co-founder and Director at Future Climate Group, Dimitri Zebelin, Geopolitical Strategist and Founder of Pantheon Insights, and we are also going to have a presentation of Márcio Lago Couto, Professor at FGV Energy in Rio. For the moderation, we are pleased to have Eduardo Melo, Professor of International Relations and in Politics at FGV School of International Relations in São Paulo. Professor Melo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mariana, and thank you to the staff at the consulate and to the staff at FGV Europe for organizing this. I guess I won't speak much. I'll start maybe by asking Dimitri to talk to us a little bit. Dimitri, you are a geopolitics expert, and you've been doing a lot of interesting work on the geopolitics of energy transition. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the opportunities for Brazil and the US to cooperate in this area, and what can both countries do to create opportunities in this field.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I think there's a large tension actually between what you might characterize as climate policy and environmental policy. And I don't think they're the same. I think environmental policy, if we define it as wanting to conserve key landmarks like the Amazon with its ecosystems, and climate policy as deindustrializing fossil fuels and shifting to renewables, I think there's a tension there that will require cross-regional efforts between the US and Brazil. For instance, we see how the energy transition is going to be a very resource-demanding endeavor. And I actually wanted to read a stat here from that I think perfectly exemplifies that. But we see how electric battery vehicles, for instance, require 15 to 20% more material than their internal combustion engine vehicles. So we can see that it's going to be incredibly resource-demanding. And if you look at some of the key minerals and resources that are necessary for this secular theme, a lot of them are cached in the Amazon. And a lot of them will require a lot of mining operations. So, and extraction and processing and transportation, which in that case will require, unfortunately, likely more deforestation in order to acquire these minerals. And this is where the geopolitics come in. Because the energy transition is not just going to be something that one can exercise with soft and hard power, it holds tremendous strategic value. So it'll be very difficult in that regard to remove the geopolitics from the equation because it holds so much strategic value. Brazil is the region's largest economy, and its active non-alignment policy is afforded by its large economy and its tremendous geopolitical standing and its leader in fossil fuel alternative resources. So there is, I think, in that regard, going to be a lot of tension between that climate policy and the environmental policy that the US and Brazil will have to coordinate. In the upcoming election, for instance, in the US, that's certainly going to influence it. And I'll speak about this, as delicately as I can, because I know it can obviously be a very contentious topic. But regardless of the relations coming up, it could be tricky because both the European Union and the US, in an attempt to want to preserve the Amazon, have played with several ideas and toolkits to be able to preserve it. One, I think the Biden administration at one point floated the idea of a trade embargo or attaching certain conditions to anti-deforestation efforts for international aid. So obviously there is a diplomatic rift there, even if the underlying goals are the same, meaning preservation. And in regard to the energy transition, how this fits in, a lot of these key minerals and resources are concentrated geographically in areas. So for instance, Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile, I believe, hold 60% of the world's lithium reserves. And just most recently, we had an attempted coup in Bolivia. And as it turns out, part of that had to do with the country's mining operations in lithium. This is not the first time we've seen something like this. We saw something, I believe it was in Guinea in 2021, where we saw an attempted coup there. I think there actually was a successful coup, and bauxite prices temporarily rose. So you have key resources narrowly concentrated in geographic areas that are showing political volatility, and that presents upside risks to greenflation. And especially if you have net zero emissions policies or SDS scenarios, you can see that it's not really a question of whether prices will rise. It's a matter of to what degree. And I think to avoid greenflation and the pushback from that, cross-regional coordination would be necessary. Reorienting supply chains to the best of one's ability in the current international climate will be necessary to stave off some of those costs. And tempering some of the idealism, for instance, with what some of the underlying realities are. Like, for instance, mining companies now, or rather mining facilities, take now 10 years to set up rather than 5, so they've doubled. And there again, we see a tension because on the one hand, the more permits and regulations were created to preserve the environment, but that then comes at the expense of these climate policies. So I don't know how we'll do it, but reconciling those two forces will be necessary to ensure a much smoother energy transition, because supply chains now are being optimized not for, I would argue, economic maximization, but geopolitical risk minimization, which is not necessarily the same thing. So until those two things are reconciled, I think it'll be very difficult to have a coordinated energy transition. As for Brazil, domestic reforms, I know have been floated, the idea of reforming some of the tax system, the system for FDI to ensure greater energy transition efforts towards biofuels. So I think until some of those reforms are made, it might be difficult to have a coordinated energy transition, especially in the international climate, so to speak. But certainly I don't think it's impossible.
Right. So I guess this would be a good moment to bring in Sylvia Pearson, who's closer geographically to me here in Sao Paulo. Sylvia, you've been working to bring investment into the state of Sao Paulo to create opportunities in this great new green economy. So could you tell us a little bit about the opportunities and the challenges in building this or fostering this green economy here in Sao Paulo and in Brazil more generally?
Sure, Professor Eduardo, thank you very much. Thank you, FGV Europe, the Brazilian Consulate, and all the partners. It's a pleasure to be here and share a little bit of our views and what we expect for the upcoming years. I think I agree with the group. We have a lot of challenges, but we have a lot of opportunities. And I think the opportunities are actually larger than the challenges that we have. I think we will find solutions very, very soon. There are all the geopolitical risks and worries, no doubt about that. But especially the US and Brazil, I think we've had an amazing partnership throughout the years, and I think we'll succeed there too. I'm going to share a little bit of our views. So Invest São Paulo is the trade investment promotion agency of the state of São Paulo. So represents not only the city of São Paulo, but also all the other municipalities of the state. We firmly believe on the shared responsibility in climate action between Brazil and the US. I don't think I have to tell this group, but I mean, it's a must that we collaborate. It's a must that we share the challenges and that we recognize what can be done. We also view, as Dimitri was saying, as Ambassador said, a huge economic opportunity in green initiatives. I'm old, so I still remember one time where we thought, economic development was something that couldn't go along with green initiatives, and that's exactly the opposite the way we see now. And I think the way that the world developed, we see the green initiatives as a great opportunity for economic development for the state of São Paulo and for Brazil, clearly. We also are happy with São Paulo state role as a leader in sustainability. We have very good numbers in Brazil. We are the major player in Brazil's environmental efforts. There's a lot of challenges because when you think about São Paulo, you think about the urban planning because the thing that comes up to your mind is São Paulo, the city, and it's way larger than New York City, and there's a lot of challenges there. But we also have the countryside. We also talk about energy. We are the major ethanol producer in Brazil. We have agriculture. So we know that this is our role, and it's a role not only to forge partnerships abroad, but also within Brazil with other states and other cities and share what we learned. And then, of course, sharing Brazil-US environmental partnerships. There are many challenges, but this opportunity, I think, will strengthen the relationship between Brazil and the US. There's a lot to be done. I think both countries can contribute a huge deal, and I think both countries are open to do this in the near future. Here's a little bit of the details of the key areas that we see São Paulo collaborating with the US. And when I say that, we're in a tricky situation because, of course, the São Paulo state is not going to negotiate with the federal level in the US. We have the embassy, the consulate, we have federal organizations, the ministries, but we are looking for partnerships with other American states where we can share what we have been doing, where we can have some more new ideas. There's a lot of states that are very similar to São Paulo. So this open conversation about the challenges and the successes is extremely important for us. I think that's why we are one of the only states to have offices abroad. So we have an office here in New York City, we have in Dubai, in China, in Shanghai, and one for Europe based in Munich. So that's extremely important for us, this partnership with other states, with cities, with federal organizations when needed. We see this as a very, very important point of our economic development and our green initiatives. Of course, one of our main targets is to find investors that would like to establish partnerships in São Paulo. So the PPPs, the public-private partnerships, we see a lot of potential when you're talking about green technologies, infrastructure, urban development, sustainable agriculture, especially environmental protection. So we have a lot of opportunities where American investors can have a presence in Brazil. And I'm a big fan of academic collaboration. So I was very happy when I received this invitation from FGV. I think the academic collaboration is a must. I'm not sure if as Brazil or as São Paulo, we have been promoting all that our universities do in Brazil, especially on climate science, agriculture. There's so much that can be shared, so there's a lot to be done there. Clean energy partnerships, it's a no-brainer. We have a little bit of a different approach in São Paulo state currently. So instead of 100% electric models, for example, for cars and vehicles, the current governor, Mr. Tarcísio, advocates for the popularization of hybrid models powered by hydrogen and biomethane. So that's a very important thing for us to share with the US and see all the examples that we have here and see how we can collaborate. Of course, the last one is also extremely important. So all the decarbonization partnerships. The governor is also emphasizing the importance of investing in technologies that boost, especially agribusiness, but also contributes to a greener planet. And I think that's another area. I mean, agriculture is an area where Brazil and the US can collaborate a lot. We work very closely with the Brazil National Confederation of Agriculture, CNA, and they are also on board. There's a lot that can be done between the US and Brazil. Of course, we have, São Paulo, as I mentioned before, when you're talking about São Paulo, I mean, we have, several forests in São Paulo, several preservation areas, but we are not in the middle of the Amazon. So our challenges are a little bit different. We have great numbers when our energy matrix, 60% renewable, when the national average is only 47. Our electricity matrix is 90% renewable, with the above world average being 25%. But we do have many challenges. Urban planning is one of them, transportation is another one, and we are not only willing, but we're very excited to start partnerships with US states, organizations, cities, to see how we can solve that, how we can become better states, better cities, better quality of life for our citizens. Well, just to finish up, just a little bit about Invest São Paulo. So we are the investment trade promotion agency for the state of São Paulo. In our foreign offices, we not only work with networking through with the local, and our area here in New York is actually Mexico, Canada, the US, and the Caribbean. So we are dedicated to forging networking and relationships for the state of São Paulo, but we also assist Brazilian companies that would like to internationalize their business to North America, and of course we also help American, Mexican, Canadian investors that would like to invest in the state of São Paulo. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's good to see all the work that Invest São Paulo has been doing. I follow your work very closely. You do excellent work. So I guess with this, it would be a good moment to call on Adalberto. So Adalberto is part of AmCham, and it's director for Brazil of the Missouri Department of Economic Development. So Adalberto, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the trade situation between the two countries and how trade environment can be sometimes in tension, sometimes complement each other, and what you've been doing there at AmCham to foster greater collaboration between the two countries.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eduardo. And it's really a pleasure to be here having these discussions that are so important for the bilateral discussions. Let me provide you a little bit about my background. I'm currently the director of Missouri Economic Development, as you presented, but I also was president of Invest Paraná, and also a leader in Apex in investment practice. So for over 25 years, we had been engaging with multinationals, investors, government incentives programs that we see the renewable and sustainable industry evolving over time. And I want to start by pinpointing some important elements on this bilateral relationship between Brazil and US. US is just the #1 destination of Brazilian industrial goods, is the #1 destination of high-tech Brazilian exports. On the other hand, is the #1 investor in Brazil, is over $230 billion of FDI stock, is about 30% of the FDI. So this relationship is growing. And our trade balance is around 75 billion, has already been at 120 billion. Just Missouri this year, for example, achieved a record 5-year record on exports to Brazil. So we have a very dynamic relationship. Of course, when we talk about environmental policy, environmental legislation, and as we start in the beginning of the webinar, this is a complex thing and evolves over time, right? There is no perfect legislation. There is no perfect policy, and it takes time. But I believe that what we are seeing on the bilateral relationship, especially on environmental and the impacts that these policies has on direct investment, on trade, I think we are reaching a very positive tipping point. I don't want to paint here any rosy scenario, any pinky, then that everything is good. Now we still have deforestation, we still have issues. But I think we are reaching a maturation of this relationship. It has been about almost 10 years of the Paris Agreement. So companies evolved, governments evolved, and NGOs and organizations like FGV, we have evolved and sophisticated this debate. But does these policies work? What is happening between Brazil and the US? And I want to trace here some parallel on both countries. Despite, for example, we are very advanced in biofuels, and US is very advanced on batteries. But so each country has its trends. But something is happening here, not only in Brazil and the US, but particularly on this relationship. So we have policy that is working. The Inflation Reduction Act that was enacted in 2022 has already brought over 370 billion in climate and energy investment. So one thing that we debated with investors for a long time in a position of CEO of investment agencies, does incentives work? Do companies need incentives? And I think on the renewable side, we see that these incentives are working. And not only at federal level, we see the second catalyst of this change, in my humble opinion, is that state level initiatives are as important as federal level initiatives. And Silvia mentioned some programs in São Paulo as well. Missouri, we also have a very aggressive incentives for renewables. But it's not only the G side, the government side, we also have the corporate commitments. And many companies are now committed to the net zero. So we are creating critical mass and momentum. Last but not least, everything changes based on availability of capital. And investor preferences are changing, not only at institutional level, but as a retail investor as well. Institutional level are protecting for risk, but retail investors are looking for something good. So this is also changing. Another factor that catalysts on that is the technology innovation and the clean tech startups. So innovation, private equity, and also the maturing of cross-cutting technology. So if you put all these together, we are creating a momentum that both Brazil and US are creating the right environments for private capital come in, invest more, be more sustainable. So that's why I am a bit positive. And I want to bring you, just to close here, some lessons from Missouri. So we created a tax credit and incentives to match the federal government. We created, for example, a program that was making possible for ICL Group, an electric vehicle battery manufacturing. They received over 197 million of loan from the Department of Energy, and they were able to locate one of the largest battery for electrical vehicles manufacturing in the US with over 400 million in capital. So you see things happening in the ground where everybody's coming together, the company with the net zero, the state with the incentives, and the federal with a stability, and we also need legislative safety. So companies need to feel secure to make the investment. So saying that, I think we have a very positive potential to get closer. First, increase the level of trade. Second, increase the level of green tech and green agenda. There is an opportunity to create synergy between the green agenda from the US and from Brazil. BNDES, for example, is creating green bonds. So there is more things we can do together. And I really believe we need more kind of forums like these to bring the debate further. And last but not least, the Amazon is really important. And we are seeing the Amazon as a tipping point as well on this relationship. So the key message here, policies work, things are happening, and concentrated effort are what make things change. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto. I guess this, so next I want to bring Salo Kozlowski, who's teaching at NYU, so he's a colleague. Salo, maybe I was reading your work before we started, and I was reading your work about trade and the Amazon forest. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the issue of trade and the kind of research you've been doing on sustainable trade.
Sure, my pleasure. I was sorry, pleasure to be here. And I was planning on finishing up, and it could have having a few remarks on why trade, I think, is the key for this collaboration or for this relationship between Brazil and the US. So I'm going to summarize what I was planning to say a little more in detail so we can get to trade faster. Overall, my assessment of the relationship between on the environmental front, US and Brazil, is that it's positive, but it's modest. It's not really a striving full of a relationship full of energy. And it's more due to, it happens through channels other than the official government channels. Now we are here, I'm calling from New York. We are just very close to the elections that's going to happen here, presidential elections in the US. During the campaign, climate change was not a topic at all. You see during the debates, when they got asked about climate change, they talk about increasing the production of natural gas. So at the highest level, what Brazil has to offer, which is combating deforestation, restore vast amounts of deforested or degraded lands, keep environmental services that benefit the whole planet, climate, water, biodiversity. This is not really top of the agenda in the US at the highest levels. What we see is that a lot of much more action happening through private channels, private companies that provide service that sell it through the government, to have transfers of technology, through training, through research, through expertise, and a lot of it gets channeled to private companies. So Starlink is obviously transformational in the Amazon. Tasso is here. He's one of the leaders of the Conexão Povos da Floresta. He can talk more about this if he wants, but this is really transforms the relationship of people living in remote areas to the rest of the world. You have all the effort all the support that Google has provided to mapping deforestations. We are now having a relationship between CPI in Brazil, Climate Policy Initiative, and NYU, in which researchers in Brazil are mapping and estimating how much money the hydroelectric plants in Brazil are losing because of deforestation. So each time you cut the trees, you dry out the flying rivers, you have less water for the hydroelectric plants. That means just less money available for producing renewable energy. And it's highly computationally intensive. We are using NYU's high powered computer cluster to calculate that. So the relationship is happening through this outside of the official budgetary USAID sort of State Department levels, and happening through the private companies. Starlink, Microsoft, who's buying lots of high-level, high-quality carbon credits in Brazil, Google and the universities, and so forth. And especially through the philanthropic efforts. The large US-based foundations provide a much more emancipatory or empowering sort of support for Brazilian organizations in the environmental front, with just a few names, to mention a few names: Moore Foundation and Bezos and Skoll and the Open Society and so forth. So to find productive engagement, you have to go beyond or underneath the high layers of government through Congress and the presidency and the high names, agencies and treaties and so forth. You don't see a lot of action there. You have to dig much deeper. And then you find all these links. They are highly consequential. Which leads me to the idea that if we really want to strengthen this and harvest the potential of the US relationship and with Brazil on the environmental front, we need to look, we cannot be too creative. It has to be conventional. It's tangible stuff, trade, the selling of forest-based products, the selling of the buying of technology, the selling of technology, the set of things, of stuff that people can really perceive the immediate, tangible, private value, not sort of big ideas are much more difficult to flourish in an environment that's so divided as the US. And there's enormous opportunity with trade. That's what I show in some of my recent research. Companies and enterprises and communities based in the Amazon already produce and export at least 60 different forest-friendly products, including all kinds of things that people dismiss as raw materials or sort of like commodities like black pepper and Brazil nuts and palm oil and so forth, but they can have enormous technology embedded in them if we know how to do it right. So the fresh products, minimally processed goods produced in the tropics can be highly sophisticated. And that's where it is people in Brazil who already know how to do it, who are already exporting it to very demanding markets, and the space for growth is immense. There is massive growing demand for fresh, minimally processed goods for directly to consumers or as inputs to other businesses, especially in the food sector, but less so in cosmetics, less so in pharmaceuticals. But food is a really big deal. And food ingredients, feedstocks, and so forth. And Brazil has not been investing enough into it. It's not taking advantage of these opportunities. So this I see as maybe not to mix too many metaphors, but as the best or the plumpiest of the low-hanging fruits to increase reforestation, increase support preservation by encouraging communities and enterprises, small, medium, and even large businesses to produce sophisticated forest-based products for the global market. And that's where I've been investing my research. That's what I've been investing my effort and working with Brazilian and foreign partners. So I'm based in New York and working in Brazil. So it's like a global network of people interested in these topics and trying to see what we need to do to make this dream get closer to being a reality of a thriving forest-based industry that produces tangible goods in large scale for many people, generating substantial amounts of money at the same time that it preserves and restores our environment. I know we are kind of running short on time, so I'm going to leave it here, and we can talk more if the moderators feel like it's worth exploring. Thank you.
Thank you, Saulo. So now I guess we go back to someone from the private sector. Laura Albuquerque's co-founder and director at the Future Climate Group. And Laura, your company has been doing amazing work helping businesses sort of navigate the challenges and find opportunities in this world of climate policies and environmental policies. So tell us maybe a little bit about the challenges. Tell us about how this is going and how firms can adapt and thrive in this new world.
So great. Thank you, Eduardo, for the question. And as I was hearing all the experts before me presenting and everything, I was asking myself, wow, so many content and so much challenge and information being shared here. And what is left to me? So that's the questions that really makes the case for Future Climate to be here sharing with you guys who we are and what we have been doing. So we combine the expertise in climate education and climate advisory in addition to climate investments. And this is something really new that we began like for the last 2 months to put our ultra high quality portfolio on carbon credits available to the market. And everything we do with a high standard portfolio on social and environmental positive impact. And this is based majorly in 2 major backbones. That is market intelligence, because our team has more than 15 years within experience in the Amazon and attracting climate capital for investment opportunities. And hands-on delivery capability, because we are not only in São Paulo, but we are also located in Manaus, inside Amazonas, one of the huge states of our Amazon. So we really were born with a mission to design, develop, and manage the next generation of climate strategies and solutions. And this is by offering huge high integrity carbon credits to the market. And this is like what brings me here and what brings future climate to the world. And hearing everything that our colleagues were saying, I would really like to share like a few, let's say, lines of actions of the potential collaboration between Brazil and the US. And bioeconomy and carbon sequestration is the first line of action, very connected to what all my colleagues have already mentioned. Brazil has the vast areas of the Amazon, and the potential to offer the enormous projects on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. The projects called as RED+, although they have been under real high fire, let's say like that, in the previous months, and especially this year, I would say, they are projects with very good results on conservation and generating revenues, actually wading in with revenues to the communities within the projects. And this makes Brazil a strategic partner for the US, which we understand that the private sector seeks to offset these emissions and achieve the climate goals. So combining the possibility of offsetting with revenue generation in the territory inside the Amazon within bioeconomy is something that we understand that creates really high value in this partnership. The other line of action would be energy transition. I believe we have been, the panel has gone through a little bit and the ambassador opening also, but both countries engaged in transitioning to cleaner energy. The cooperation between Brazil and the US can accelerate this process. And regarding the energy transition, I will bring something up that I left to the conclusions where I prepared myself, but I think it's really, really important that we understand that we're here with a huge focus on in the Amazon, but the diversity is something that we should consider when we talk about energy, because we have a vast, actually we have a bias to always talk about renewables and talk about electrification. And when we talk about energy in Brazil, we have a diversity of potential of generating energy by other renewables, as the biogas, and just yesterday was with a high-level professor talking about the potential of generating hydrogen by biogas in Brazil. And so maybe electrifying and receiving, transitioning from combustion engines to electrifying vehicles, it's not the great solution for a specific region in Brazil. We have very different characteristics in our different states that should be taken in consideration when we talk about the solutions. The solutions in the territory should be really tailored made for considering the huge and diverse natural resource that we offer and the challenges in each territory. And considering energy transition, after everything that I've mentioned, generating carbon credits, specifically in the biogas, has been a huge opportunity for small farm holders. And this also generates revenues for this type of small economy that we need to foster. So the above two topics that I mentioned and regarding conservation and energy transition, they both arrive in the voluntary carbon market. There is a specific third line of action that I would like to share with you, because we do understand that the voluntary carbon market, where companies and individuals can buy carbon credits to offset their emissions, is an expanding area. And when we do understand the rules and the standards to operate in this mechanism, we really understand that Brazil can benefit from this market by generating revenue through the sale of carbon credits in the reduction emissions in the projects. And we really need to understand this mechanism as a mechanism of paying for the environmental services, for paying for services as we pay for tradables. And finally, I would finish a little bit of what I have already shared with you with the international pressure, the last line of action of collaboration. There is a growing international pressure to tackle climate change. This is driving the creation and development of carbon markets worldwide, compulsory and also voluntary carbon markets. And the cooperation between Brazil and the US can really strengthen both of the countries' positions in this agenda. And we understand that we have a positive scenario in terms of having a good influence in the global rules and raising the level of the standards that have been used today. So I think by now I would stop here just to share a little bit in terms of what we have been doing and what we see as fostering the cooperations between these two really great countries in this agenda. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for sharing a little bit here.
Thank you, Laura. So I think our last panelist is Márcio Lago Couto, who is Professor of Strategy here at FGV, and he's based at FGV Energy, which is our lab focusing on energy policy. So Márcio, I understand you have a presentation for us on what FGV Energy has been doing.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. I have a presentation. I'm going to put it here. I'll go as fast as I can so I'll not take too much time. Although most of the researchers spoke about climate change, I'm going to focus in a little bit of different themes. I'm going to go through energy sector trends and energy transition in Brazil, and how we go along with US collaboration. We have a major collaboration with US consulate in Rio de Janeiro, and we have spoken to a lot of government officials in Rio. Although I agree with Professor Salo that Brazil is not a major player in the world geopolitical themes. We think that Brazil is an important player to give scale to the new technological routes for energy. So regarding that, this is just to present FGV and FGV Energy that we usually have two lines of research, one in the electric sector, the other one in oil and gas and renewables. And we've been sponsored by Brazilian companies of the sector, including Brava Energy, Eletrobras, Eletronuclear, Ipiranga, Norte Energia, Prio, Shell, and Vale. Climate and energy issues are increasingly integrated to tackle the GHG emissions. Once we have more intense and frequent climate events like melting in several draws, as we are seeing in Brazil, more important is the theme of energy transition, because energy for the world is 76 of global emissions by sector. So energy has been a big offender in the questions of climate. And in that sector, we have a huge challenge to go from the point that we are now in million tons of carbon emission to the emissions for different scenarios, as the scenarios traced by International Energy Agency, including net zero, which would increase only 1.5 degrees. So we think that Brazil is well positioned on that, but each country has different chronologies and different goals to achieve net zero. As we see in the right side, Germany is it's aiming to get to achieve net zero at 2045. Most countries are aiming for 2050, but Russia and China, which are two of the biggest GHG emitters, are aiming only for 2006, and India, which will be a major player country in the next few decades, has target only for 2070. So the biggest countries that are players in this market has different aims and chronograms to achieve net zero. And Brazil is contributes only with 1.3% of global energy emission at this point, to which position Brazil's very well positioned regarding other countries. And when we talk about energy transition to net zero, we have to talk about energy trilemma, which addresses security, energy for the global development, addresses affordability and access to for people to energy, and sustainability. So this it's a big challenge to integrate and coordinate all the efforts for and policies for achieve those three goals that most of the country has. In this sense, Brazil is well positioned by this energy matrix. We see that oil products respond to only 35% of all emissions. And the forecast for total energy supply in Brazil will have to go from 51% non-renewables to a goal of 29% at 2050. So Brazil is not the greater, has a greater challenge between countries, and that's why Brazil is well positioned for this process. One other question that poses a challenge for Brazil is that Brazil is increasing oil export. Brazil will be in 2030 the fifth greater oil exporter in the world, and that has we think that has political, economic, and geopolitical consequences for Brazil. Most of the economic crisis that Brazil have been dealing with since 1980s were mostly because of poor energy sources, and the biofuel programs were early started because we had to have an alternative to oil, and this has two dimensions that Brazil have to deal with. From one side, we have to increase going to net zero. From the other side, Brazil at the first time will be a great player in the world market. And but nevertheless, the programs of biofuel have been successful utilized in Brazil. So Brazil is one of the greatest degrader mixer in the transportation use of biofuel. We know transportation is a big offender in GHG, so Brazil is well positioned and has, as Ambassador said, has huge opportunity to be a biofuel provider to other countries. And there is a lot of programs and that are being elaborated and being approved at Congress to go in that direction. So with that commission to the energy transition was one of the highlights of the last meeting of G20 in 2024, which were held in September in Foz do Iguaçu. And there are trends in Brazil is well positioned in all those trends. So the trends identified in the initial meeting was especially biogas and with use of biogas in biomethane, hydrogen, nuclear, renewable solar and winds, as a feed for aviation. So Brazil is working in all those fronts to be an important player in all those energy providers. And regarding what Laura just said, we have a huge opportunity in carbon market, but there is a lot of challenges to carbon capture and storage. So the main priorities that Brazil has aimed at this point for energy transition is access to the financing the energy transition, the question of social dimension of energy transition. We know that Brazil still have 7.5 million people that doesn't have access to clean energy, to cooking. So there is a big challenge on that too. And perspectives in the innovation for sustainable trends. In that case, we think that Brazil will be a major player to give scale to the technological routes that main developed countries are looking for. In this case, I'd like to highlight that in the U.S. relation, most of our interaction from the U.S. are the interest in China investments in Brazil. China is being the greater investor in Brazil in the last few years. Although it's not the greater one, but it's increasing investing in energy sources, especially in oil producing and electricity transmission. In the oil producing, companies from China will overpass Shell as the second biggest oil producer in Brazil. So there is, as we think, a softer power politics in the countries from BRICS, which Brazil is being at this point an important player. So Brazil at this point is involved in leading G20, is involved in COP30 next year in Belém, and is being a major player at BRICS, remembering that BRICS GDP has overcome G7 GDP in the last year. So we think that benefits of energy transition, and that's what Brazilian government is aiming. It's to get a more affordable energy, replacing polluted fuels, cross-border connections, energy efficiency, generating jobs and income, and access to energy to isolate population. So as I think Professor Dimitri has said, we have a big question and a big challenge on coordination of politics that may at some point be contradicted in the objects that they aim. So this is what I have to show. We have done a geopolitical a study on the low carbon energy, studying some of this question and some of question of maritime routes, international maritime routes for exporting renewables and oil also. So thank you very much. Thank you again for the invitation, Eduardo. And
Thank
I'm
you,
available
Marcio.
anything you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcio. And thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I was hoping that we could keep the conversation going, but I guess this is going to be one of many events we're going to have on this topic. So I just want to thank you all and pass the floor to Mariana again.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Eduardo. Thank you, all panelists. I'm sorry we are a bit behind the schedule, but thank you again for the participation. Right now, I think we should proceed with the agenda and start the second panel, Integrated Public Policies for Sustainable Development. For this panel, we are pleased to have Kleber Guarani, Sustainability Project Manager at FGV Europe, Paula Wojciechowicz, Director of the Centre of Excellence Jean Monnet, FGV Center of EU South America Global Governance, and Professor at FGV Law School Rio, Tasso Rezende, General Coordinator of MAP Biomas, Lab-affiliated scholar at Princeton University, Carlos Nobre, Professor and Global Environmental Researcher at the Amazon We Want Fund, Enrique Ortiz, Senior Program Director of the Andes Amazon Fund, and our moderator for this panel is Sidney Nakahodo, Lecturer in International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. Professor Sidney, the floor is yours. We are not hearing you. No, we are not hearing you.
How about now?
Yes, perfect.
All right, thank you. Welcome to today's webinar, Integrated Public Policies for Sustainable Development in the Amazon. The Amazon is not just a Brazilian issue, but a global one. This ecosystem is vital for regulating the Earth's climate and is home to incredible biodiversity. It also supports millions of people whose livelihoods depend on its resources. However, deforestation, climate change, and governance pose significant threats to the Amazon's future. Our conversation today is especially relevant as Brazil will host COP30 next year in Belém, with the Amazon's preservation and sustainable development at the forefront of global discussions. This is a critical moment to reflect on how public policies can help address the challenges facing the region. We'll start a discussion with a short presentation by Kleber. His insights will give us a foundation for the panel discussion by outlining the successes, challenges, and areas for improvement in public policy.
Thank
Kleber,
you.
the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning for everyone. Just to present my presentation, share my presentation. Okay, so I'd like to just a minute. So I'd like to reinforce our work in the environmental sector on the region that we call Tropical Belt on the globe, highlighting our work in the Amazon region for GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, where we are managing the financial and technical aspects for the fund. So FGV, as a think tank, has discussed new ideas, new models to face the world challenges. And environmental sector has been one of our priorities. And following this job, the main focus on my presentation right today is to discuss how Brazil can strengthen his role as a key player in tracking global climate change and protecting the environment. Meaning right now, we know that the environmental agenda is not at the top of the international concerns. And my question is, how should Brazil play a great global role in protecting the environmental and combating the effects of climate change? First of all, let's consider that Brazil has very clean energy matrix and very rich biodiversity, and Amazon is our hard jewels. Therefore, Brazil has the credentials to take a greater role in the world in protecting the environmental and combating the effects of climate change. Amazon, we know that is the largest biodiversity reserve on the planet and represent an important carbon stock too. Let's see some numbers about Amazon. 82% of the forests are preserved. 50% of the biodiversity of the world. Amazon has 50% of the biodiversity in the world. It's in Amazon. It's fantastic. Amazon has only 7% of the land of the globe, but 50% of the biodiversity, 20% of fresh water available, less than 5% of the plant species studied that, for instance, represent a potential for medicinal benefits, and 200 million tons of carbon are stored there in Amazon. So this region is so special for Brazil, but for the world too. From this perspective, we believe that Brazil can play an important role strengthening the community of all countries, especially USA, where we are a good dialogue, and of course, the countries of the Global South as well, where we have an important tropical forest too, and similar Amazon forestry, and which we need to be preserved and take advantage of the full biodiversity potential that we have in those kind of forest. So despite of many good actions and investments that we have been making in Amazon region, unfortunately, it's not enough. We know that we needed to do more. We needed to accelerate the actions to achieve our goals of protecting the forest with a new economic approach. We needed to increase the capillarity of actions in that huge regions. This is the sense of urgency. And we believe that the way to do that should be approached based on the market logic. This is the concept that we are developing to speed up the actions that we needed to have in the Amazon, where we can increase the participation of the private sector. Market logic is basically to increase the participation to protect the forest of the private sector. By increasing the private sector participation, we can take advantage of the forest potential and increase its protection. And just to explain this idea, or this approach based on the market logic, we have some priority sectors that require urgent investments in Amazon regions, and that we can release it with a participation of the private sector of Brazil and USA, of course, and other countries too. Basically, we have we need investments in several sectors in Amazon. Just to give some sectors that we needed to invest in. Tourism. Unfortunately, Amazon that don't have much tourists, ecotourism. We need investment in tourism. This is help a lot to protect the forest. And we needed to project it to carbon sequestration, carbon credits. We don't have enough. We have a huge potential for that. And it's important to protect the forest. we needed explore more the non-forest timber products like fruits, seeds, nuts, to have a huge variety of products that we can explore in Amazon in the value chain. Bioprospecting is a huge sector to mapping the biological and genetic research used to develop a new biotechnology. I'm sure that a lot of company that could be interested to go to the Amazon forest to understand the biodiversity. Basic sanitation, portable water and saltage treatment. It is a problem in Amazon region. We need investment in this area. I think that we need to open PPP project for this sector there. Education, can you imagine we can have the main university in the world, Harvard, Cambridge, goes to the Amazon to participate in to protect the forest, in the study, making a research and something like that. So the main role of the Brazilian government in this perspective, in our opinion, is to establish an investment framework and provide tax incentives for sustainable projects in Amazon. This type of approach has already made it several years ago by the Brazilian government in 1970s, but with a different proposal. The proposal at this time was just to occupation the region. But right now, we are suggesting that this kind of incentives can be made to protect the forest and take advantage of the whole its biodiversity and sustainable manner, in a sustainable manner, to attract the private sector to invest in the region, in Amazon region. This is what we believe, and we are working this kind of approach. So this is the message today. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Sidney.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kleber. Kleber set a stage for a discussion that I'm sure we will all benefit based on the insights of a stellar panel that we're going to have right now. And here we're going to go a little bit off script. I know that some of the panelists had prepared presentations, but in order to make the discussion more dynamic, my suggestion is that we start with focused questions, and if there's anything that we need to clarify, we go back to the PowerPoint, okay? So the panel discussion will progress from governance and legal frameworks to global environmental challenges, and then to specific sustainability actions on the ground. So the first topic is governance and legal frameworks for sustainable development. Let's start with Professor Paula Wojciechowicz Almeida. Professor Paula, how can international agreements and national policies be aligned more effectively to overcome governance challenges and protect the Amazon?
Thank you, Sidney. May I start by sharing my screen? Just a second.
Yeah, we can ask the organizers to help you with that. But I might suggest that let's get 2 to 3 minutes maximum so that everyone has a chance to interact later on.
Just need to, just a second. Oh, I'm trying to find it here. Oh, I don't see it. Oh. What happened here, but I don't see my screen. Here, now I can, okay. So Sidney, I understand that you are proposing us to change a little bit of what we did, what we plan to do here today. Well, I'm going to answer you, but I would like to know whether I should keep going on my initial presentation on what I prepared for today, or whether it would be just enough for me to give an answer to a question. Because I'm specialized in international law and EU law, what I did mostly was to discuss the challenges that we have today for the multilateral forest protection and forest regulation. So it answers your question in some aspects, but it goes well beyond. I don't know what I should do right now. Well, should I answer to your question and just just skip my presentation, or should I present here? What
Yeah.
would you
My
ask me
suggestion
to
is that let's skip the presentation. Let's stay focused on the question, and then we go back to the presentation if we need to clarify some specific points related to what you had prepared.
Okay, well, so you asked me how international agreements and national policies could be aligned, right, more effectively to overcome governance challenges and protect the Amazon. So how could I respond to that? Well, the first main point is that the protection of the environment, and also the protection of the Amazon and climate change these are issues that can be considered as global public goods, right? As you mentioned in your presentation as well, in the beginning of the presentation. So this is, if they are recognized as global public goods, it means that the whole international community has an interest in their protection. But who can act as the representative of the international community to protect the Amazon? So would that be Brazil? Would that be a coalition of governments together having, writing an agreement to protect the forests, or could it be the European Union? So what happens is that, as we don't have an international agreement on the topic that could be binding on the states, and also on the actors that are playing a role in this area, what happens is that the European Union has taken a very proactive step on this. And the EU has issued a regulation which is binding for the EU, but is not limited for the EU territory, because it's going to have an impact also in Brazil and in other affected countries. So the EU has taken a very proactive role, which has been criticized a lot, because it could be criticized because it could violate some trade rules, could violate the very basic norms from the WTO, but it could also go against some mechanisms that some countries that are going to be affected, they already have. Such as Brazil, for example, in its normative instruments and all the regulation that we have already in the country, that sometimes the EU norm contradicts some of our norms internally. So the EU, I'm giving you more focus on the EU, because as the EU norm was going to enter into force now, it has been postponed last week, and the Council has just voted for the postponement for 12 months. So it would enter into force by the end of this year, but now if the Council votes in favorably to the postponement, then the EU regulation is going to enter into force next year. And the EU has just published lots of instruments concerning guidelines and guidance documents in general, and also video trainings, and lots of informative documents for the countries that are going to be affected. For example, I'm saying Brazil, but all the affected countries that are exporting commodities for the EU, and these commodities are in the Amazon, because it's going to be applied to at least 7 commodities from now on, because then it could be expanded. But it's going to be applied to 7 commodities that are exported by Brazil and other countries to the EU, such as cocoa and rubber, timber, and coffee, and so on. And what happens is that Brazil and other countries will have to follow some due diligence requirements, and will have to, if Brazil wants to keep exporting to the EU, will have to follow lots of requirements concerning certification mechanisms, concerning traceability mechanisms, and also monitoring mechanisms. So there's a lot going on in this debate on forest regulation, and in terms of the normative framework, I would say that the EU is leading, the debate, and now the challenge is for us whether we want to adapt to this or whether we want to contest, whether the implementation is going to be smooth or whether it's going to be an unilateral implementation. So there is a huge challenge coming to us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Professor Paula. I think you've outlined pretty well the idea that some challenges can be transformed into opportunities, and the EU is stepping up by taking advantage of those opportunities. And talking about challenges, let's switch gears and talking about global environmental challenges and the Amazon sustainability. And I would like to ask Dr. Carlos Nobre about what immediate global policy actions are essential to prevent the Amazon from reaching its ecological tipping point, which was an issue that was raised in the previous panel.
Yes, Sydney, thank you very much. In fact, I'm here at COP16. And let me say initially, yes, the Amazon is very close, very, very close to the climate and ecological tipping point. If we continue deforestation and global warming, we may reach the tipping point by 2050. Self-degradation will really degrade between 50 and 70% of the Amazon within 30 to 50 years. This is a ecocide for the planet, not only for the Amazon. So we need really to change many global policies and regional policies, local policies. Well, since this is a discussion with US-Brazil collaboration, so I will say a few words. First, historically in the lowlands in the Amazon, it is all Brazilian Amazon, 90% of deforestation is for cattle ranches, pastures for cattle ranches. All of that, almost all of that, is completely illegal. Completely illegal. Organized crime controls the legal land market. So, unfortunately, in Brazil, the politicians legalize a lot of these illegally taken forest areas. So my initial big challenge to the US, please, US is the second largest importer of beef from the Amazon, from Brazilian Amazon. China is #1, US is #2. So my first challenge to the US is really do something similar to European Union. Really create a legal framework for, like, European Union, January 2021, anything deforested after that will not be exported to anywhere in the world, but also in all Amazonian countries, in Brazilian Amazon, all of Brazil, but Brazilian Amazon. So, and any deforestation, so there is no distinction between legal versus illegal areas. So US, please, also approves in your Congress a law equivalent to European Union. Zero deforestation, legal, illegal, zero. Because if you do that, as European Union is doing that, then you reduce a lot the driver of deforestation, because unfortunately, illegal deforestation continues to be the main driver of deforestation in all of the Amazon, particularly in the Brazilian Amazon. So this would be my first suggestion and request to the US. Do something similar. And of course, this is US-Brazil, but we also say, China, please stop importing products coming from the forest areas, recently deforested areas in the Brazilian, in all Amazonian countries. My second point is, yes, as many of you have already mentioned, the potential of the ecosystem services. I'm here at COP16. We are very hopeful COP16 will, in fact, create, we dream about a $200 billion, the global biodiversity fund, $200 billion a year. That will be essential to protect the biodiversity all over the planet, but certainly the Amazon has the highest biodiversity in the planet. And also it will be very important to the US, also to the world, but to the US in particular, to realize that degrading the Amazon forest, we are going to put all the planet, not only the Amazonian populations, under a tremendous risk of epidemics and pandemics. For the first time since the Europeans came 500 years ago to South America, we have had now Marayo fever and Oropushi virus. So this became, for the first time, Oropushi virus an epidemic all over Brazil now, Colombia as well. More than 15,000 people all over Brazil are now infected by the Oropushi virus. The science has shown more than 40 zoonoses in the Amazon. They can become epidemics, and some of them can become
Dr. Nobre, I think we're having some connection issues. Can you hear us? All right, we go back to Dr. Nobre if he gets reconnect.
Also.
All right. I think we have to move on, and we'll get Dr. Nobre to participate in the discussion, right? Awesome. So we talked about governance and legal frameworks on a global scale. You talked about challenges on a global scale. And we know that one of the biggest challenges is to translate policy into actions. So let's move to more practical solutions for sustainable development and restoration, starting with Tasso. And Tasso, how can restoration efforts balance the needs for environmental recovery with sustainable economic development for the Amazonian communities?
Yeah, probably the first point to take in consideration is like this reality that's happening very fast in the Amazon, like all the deforestation that we have in the Amazon, the loss of forest cover, which is getting to close to 20% now, happens in a very short period of time. So if you take the first time that we measure deforestation in the Amazon was in the 70s, early 70s. And then it shows that only 0.5% of the Amazon has been deforested at that point. So I was born in 72. So it's my lifetime. We basically managed to rip off 20% of the forest in the Amazon. And if you look at like a historical perspective, when the Portuguese arrived in Brazil 500 years ago, the number of people living on the rural areas in the Amazon is estimated in about 6 to 7 million people. And that's basically what we have today in the rural areas of the Amazon. So like in 500 years, there was 0.5% deforestation. And then just on the last 50 years is 20%. So the speed in which this thing is happening that's the most crucial thing. The other thing interesting, and that has to do with the restoration, is that it's not just that we lose like this 20%. Is the fact that there is also degradation. So if you think only about the areas that got on fire on the last 40 years, we have been measured that for some time now. And about 8% of what is remaining of forest in the Amazon has burned at least once. So it's another 8% of degradation. And if you take the areas along the roads and the areas that have been logged, not clear-cut, but logged, is another 20%. So it's fair to say that the area that is degraded or deforested, it's probably over 50% of the Amazon. And that's what is really important to think about, like when you talk about the tipping points that Professor Carlos Nobre was saying before. Now, on the other hand, there is a lot of areas that is being kind of naturally regenerating, coming back. And we have today about 10 million hectares under regeneration in the Amazon, which is like 2.5 times the state of Rio de Janeiro. So it's kind of a large area, which is not being regenerating or restored by, let's say, a positive, incentivized, proactive program of restoration. It's just happened that this is land that has been clear-cut and then has been abandoned. A lot of the times abandoned because of degradation. And then it's just being recovered by the nature itself. So when we talk about the challenge of restore the Amazon, we have to think about those areas also. Like, this is not just about thinking on how to plant new areas to recover, it's how to take care of the regeneration that is happening there and make this regeneration, let's say, productive in terms of the economy and the society. So one important thing is that all those 20% that have been clear cut of the forest is really concentrated on a certain space on the Amazon, what we call the arc of deforestation. So if you just take those areas and separate from the rest of the Amazon, we have more than 50% clear cut. And there are municipalities in the Amazon where the area remaining on forest is less than 10%. Like the city of São Paulo, the municipality of São Paulo has 20% of forest. And we have like cities in the Amazon, municipalities in the Amazon that has less than 10%, which is like quite striking. So it's important that it's not just about like stop deforestation, it's about like restoring the forest. So I would suggest two things, like objectively. One is like the forest is being impacted right now, not just the forest, but like the water in the water cycles also by the climate change right now. So if we do all the efforts to stop deforestation in the Amazon and to start the restoration, but climate change continues on the speed it's happening, with the emissions of fossil fuels still growing, it will be worthless. Like, we'll do the effort for nothing because the forest will turn on the tipping point the same way. So US, I'm thinking of just US and Brazil. US is the largest producer of fossil fuels now, by far in the world. Brazil, it's growing. We are now the 8th largest producer, probably will be like 5th or 6th in 2-3 years. And so I don't know how can we talk about like protecting the Amazon without, have a very, very serious policy on phasing out fossil fuels. Like, we cannot be, filling our countries and the rest of the world with fossil fuels and talking about protection of the Amazon, thinking that this could offset, for example, what's happening with fossil fuels. This will never happen. Like, even if you protect the whole Amazon, etc., you not make a scratch on what's necessary in terms of combating climate change if we don't fight the fossil fuels. So I would think that this is actually should be on a very top priority. The second thing is, we will not have the financing of the protection of the Amazon and restoration, thinking on like carbon markets and offsets and etc. First, because the carbon from conservation is like for the purpose of compensation or offset of emissions has no meaning on a project basis. Like mathematically speaking, has no meaning. It's just an accountability thing, an counting thing, right? It makes sense when you talk about a whole country, but not make sense on project base. So we have to think about a kind of a mechanism in which we just recognize the value of the forest conservation by all the services and products that the forest give to all of us, including the cooling effect, and have a global mechanism to pay for the maintenance, not just from the Amazon, but all the tropical forests. And I think this instrument that Brazil has put forward recently, the Tropical Forests Forever mechanism, could be one of those opportunities to make something large scale. And I would bet also would be nice to see this connected to the oil industry to pay the bill. But I think we have to do something in this area. And the last point, which and I will finish here, is that there is a lot of things that needs to be done in terms of investment on infrastructure in the region. Not infrastructure for the rest of the country, but infrastructure for the people that lives there. And lives there from the forests and live there together with the forests. And these are two main things that are happening right now, very important. One is connectivity, is how to connect the more than 8,000 communities that live in the region. And the second is electrification of navigation. That's an absolutely crucial point because half of the income of the population living on the riverbanks and through the Amazon is spent on fuel. So if we can manage a way to actually make everything electric using solar energy, batteries, and so on, we can not just make them much more sustainably in terms of climate, etc., but we can make their economic empowerment much stronger. So just 2 points of an infrastructure, very local, that would be interesting in terms of large scale change.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tasso. And that's a great segue for the last topic here with Enrique Ortiz, because when you talk about conservation strategies and local sustainable initiatives, it becomes much more tangible when we have very concrete examples of those interventions. Right? So, Enrique, can you highlight some successful conservation strategies that can be scaled across the Amazon region based on your personal experience?
Yeah, thank you, Sydney. And as Paula said, we all prepared our presentation, so I'm going to try to go straight to the point and answer the specific question. I think one of the more interesting successes in Brazil has been in the last year to reduce deforestation by almost half. And there are a number of lessons to be learned from there. But when thinking about U.S.-Brazil collaboration, I think about the sharing of in the fields of technology as well as in intelligence. Technology important for a number of reasons. A number of them is like the mapping and identification of problems, and Tasso is very much aware of that as director of Map Biomas. But the part of intelligence is very important. What we're seeing today is that in the Amazon in general, and you think about Brazil, you think of Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, there are mafias that are actually joining together different forces, and we need to confront that. It is becoming to be from an environmental also to a national security issue. And the US has been very good in actually identifying and starting prosecution of different problems that we already had. So that's one of them. And one thing to be remembered is that most of deforestation in Brazil is occurring in undesignated lands. And this is one of the efforts where not only US government, but also the private sector is supporting, is actually in closing that gap of undesignated lands, which again, more than 50% of the deforestation has occurred. The second point, and just summarizing, a much longer argument, is seconding what Professor Nobre mentioned before. The issue of supporting, number one is, closing the gaps or closing those economies that are supporting deforestation is an important one. The moment when the US is trending towards protectionism is one that needs to be considered greatly. We need to support more of those successful enterprises that are based on forest economies. There are a number of examples of that. It was mentioned before, the case of acai, even African palm, even though it sounds contradictory. The third point, one thing is important to mention is that the issue of biotechnology is critical. Some people consider that actually the reason why Amazonas state has still 96% of its forests standing is because of being a hub of as a free zone area, a hub of technology. And there is no reason, as Professor Nobre mentioned before, why not could be a biotechnology center. And finally, this is not so much about US intervention, but I think there is a need of asking for a more coherence in the government of Brazil in terms of infrastructure development. And lastly, I wanted to mention about the OTCA, that the organization of the OTCA is a cooperation agreement treaty. Brazil is as being the biggest, sharing the biggest part of the Amazon, has a leading role in how to move the OTCA. The only organization that probably is putting together the Amazonian countries to have I guess, a joint approach to facing issues and facing also successes. And that's one where still hasn't realized. We hope that in this COP and the one in Belém, we'll have it already secure and I guess effective. And finally, just to mention that the climate COP in Belém next year will be a critical moment where the US and the rest of the world should actually help to make this event or this meeting one of, we can say there is a before and after, in the same way as the Paris one was. And that's where I think we all can actually support this successful event. I'll leave it there, Sydney.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Enrique. I know that we only have 5 minutes, and I'm glad that we adopt this format of more interactive discussions instead of having through the presentations, because this allows us to spend a few more minutes in on an open discussion here. Here's a question for the panel, and feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to address the issue of low-hanging fruits. Right? What can we do in the short run in order to be able to produce a significant impact that can help steer policy in the right direction? And Dr. Nobre, since we missed you for a few minutes and you're back, why don't we get started with you?
Yes, of course. I mean, as mentioned by many of our colleagues here, we are reducing deforestation, degradation. However, we have an explosion of wildfires in 2023 and also record-breaking forest fires 2024. So there's a big challenge. I just want to raise one thing that I was going to talk before I was cut off. Is the big challenge of organized crime. Organized crime is, the Igarapé Institute made an estimate close to $300 billion a year. So they are associated to all deforestation, degradation, illegal gold mining, illegal land markets, illegal selective logging. So I would say, we have to be very, very careful, and particularly US should continue with policies to really do not import any gold, for instance, from the Amazon and things like that. That's one. It was one of my points. But answering your question, yes, I mean, as mentioned by many of you, the greatest socio-economic potential of the Amazon is what we call a social bioeconomy of healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. It's totally possible to start making this new economy with many hundreds of products from the biodiversity. We need science as well to improve the use of those products, particularly pharmaceuticals, for instance. So I would say low-hanging fruits, it would be how US and the Amazonian countries, particularly US and Brazil, can collaborate to give scale to this new social bioeconomy. And in particular, I was going to mention in my initial talk, we have a collaboration with MIT, Stanford, and many universities in the US, in Brazil. We want to create the Amazon Institute of Technology. It's an MIT Quality Institute of Technology for this new social bioeconomy, how to create the science, but also how to do, thousands of undergraduate, graduate students a year for this new bioeconomy. So I would say US-Brazil collaboration in creating MIT Quality Institute of Technology is something that we would need to immediately, perhaps in 3 years, 2 years, we can start this Institute of Technology that would really create the scientific technological conditions. And also in our project, we want also to bring to the Institute of Technology the knowledge of indigenous people. Indigenous people and local communities, they've been living in the Amazon for 16,000 years, always keeping the forest, keeping biodiversity. So those would be my thoughts about the immediate policies that we need to save the Amazon.
Thank you, Dr. Nobre. And that's a very interesting example, right? Because we have a precedent with ITA, what ITA has done for aeronautics, like what you're proposing can be done to save the Amazon. All right, I see Enrique's hand raised.
Yeah. Just very quickly, Sidney. One that is very straight is that we have a government that is friendly for the environment right now, and we need to support this government in the last 2 years that it has to go. That's very critical. It's very clear and very simple. I want to mention one case where among funders, including Bezos Earth Fund, Moore Foundation, and the Amazon Fund, and a number of others have joined hands to actually maximize results and minimize transaction costs to support government policies as well as state policies to protect forests. We call it a POP, Protect Our Planet. It has been about $200 million that we put together, and it's actually already giving results just shortly.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. For the other speakers, any reaction on low-hanging fruits?
Well, I could jump in.
Yes, please.
Well, in terms of what we could do, and in the short term, I think we are already doing some of the what is available for us. For example, we put pressure on the on the topic of deforestation. We have been putting pressure on the EU to postpone the regulation so that we could discuss and not only adapt, but also discuss on the mechanisms and on the measures that are being proposed and on the suitability of those measures. And I think we should also engage in a more or disseminate maybe the measures and everything that we've been promoting internally, and to bring to the discussion, to the table with the EU, what are the instruments that we already have for the protection of forests, and what is effective and what is not effective, and show to the EU that some of what the mechanisms they propose won't work for our specific context. So I think we should keep discussing and keep putting pressure in the short term. Thank you.
Excellent. And I think that's exactly what we're doing today, right? Sharing ideas, disseminating best practices, talking about long-term and also especially in the short term, like what we can do in order to steer the things in the right direction. So in closing, today's section discussion highlighted that while the Amazon faces immense challenges, there's also potential for innovative solutions. With COP30 on the horizon, Brazil has a unique opportunity to lead the world in creating integrated policies that balance environmental protection with sustainable development. Our takeaway today is the need for holistic and integrated policies that link global commitments to local realities, ensure robust governance, and balance the urgency of environmental preservation with the economic needs of the region. This approach is essential if we are to protect the Amazon and its communities for future generations. Thank you to our panelists for their insightful contributions. And thank you to all of you for participating in this important conversation. Now, over to Mariana.
Thank you, Professor Sidney. Thank you all panelists for the valuable insights. I'm sorry that we had to rush a little bit the panels since we ran a bit behind the schedule. But thank you again for the participation, and we are looking forward to the future discussions. For the closing remarks, I would like to once again invite Dr. Cesar to speak. Cesar?
Oh, hello. So thank you all for the very, very good seminar. I think we reach our aim that to promote dialogue in this subject that is very important for us and for the human being. And I'd like to thanks to our speakers, moderators, participants, and organizing team, and also especially for Mariana Fleischhauer. Thank you for leadership, dedication, and perseverance and delivering this event. I think it was very good and well done. So finally, I could also not end this event without thanking our partners, FGV Direito Rio, and FGV School of International Relations, FGV Energy, and our supporters, AmCham, Andes Mazonsan Fund, Invest São Paulo, New York, Future Climate Group, Global, Oxford Group, Patel Insights, and the Amazon We Want. So thank you all again, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. So right now, finishing the webinar, I would like to introduce Thiago de Faria Miranda, Deputy Consul General of Brazil in New York. And I also want to extend my personal gratitude to you, Thiago, for all your support, time, and effort invested in this event. It has been a true pleasure and honor to work with you together. So please, Thiago, you have the floor for the final remarks.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Professor Cesar. Thank you, Mariana. Now it's better, right? FGV Europe team for being our partners today in organizing this very interesting webinar on Brazil and the US environmental perspectives for collaboration, for strengthening the collaboration. And I would like, of course, to thank all the speakers, the panelists, the moderators for these interesting presentations and debate. Of course, I'd like to thank all the people watching us online. And finally, I would like to invite you all for an event, in person event that we are planning to organize with FGV Europe again, our partners. It will be an event in March or April next year for discussing two issues that are combined and related in the Brazilian perspective. Environmental issues, especially energy transition, and the potential for investments in Brazil in artificial intelligence structure, especially data centers, right? So this event will be in person in New York, as some of our guests here today could participate easily, I suppose, more easily, as the professors Sidney Nakamoto, Tasso, and of course Silva as well. All the participants that are based in New York can be easily. But I'd like as well to extend this invitation for other participants that are based on other parts of the world, if they can join us here in New York next year, it would be much appreciated. So thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss this very important subject here today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Thiago. Thank you, all panelists, moderators, and participants. I think this is the final message for today, and we hope to see you next year, as Thiago invited, in New York City. Thank you again and see you soon.